Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome to the NoDQ panel right here on NoDQ.com. I am being joined as always by my panel guests. First we have the legendary trivia champion, good old JM Jeff Meacham, as well as the self-proclaimed greatest columnist in the entire universe, Mr. David, aka Virtue. How's it going, Virtue?
Awesome, man. This is a good topic today.
Yes, this is
They're
a
all
good
they're all
topic.
good topics.
Well,
That's
because
right.
I came up with them. But anyways,
Oh, yeah, this is true.
we are being joined by a longtime No DQ viewer and question contributor, Mr. Tyler Joseph Smith. Thank you, Tyler, for being on today. Your first appearance on the No DQ panel. How's it going, Tyler?
It's going well. Glad to be on. It's my first time on the panel, like you said. So I'm looking forward to talking today. So
He's popping his panel cherry. Wait, what happened?
Ooh, nice one, Jeff. Well
Boom.
played, sir.
Oh,
But anyways, let's not
yeah.
get off topic here. Let's stick to what we're here to discuss, and that is the wrestlers that never reached their full potential. Now, this could be wrestlers that are underrated, but I also include wrestlers that were on their way to becoming major stars, and some of them were very highly rated, but unfortunately there were other factors, injuries, and sometimes worse things that happened. Let's go ahead and discuss some of the names. The first two I would like to bring up, Scott Hall and Jake the Snake Roberts. Two guys that are very highly rated. Many people would call them two of the most deserving guys that never had the world championship. And I think, especially in Scott Hall's case, I think Razor Ramon could have been potentially the WWE champion in the mid-90s during that era, and maybe even in WCW as well. But unfortunately, Hall's personal life really started to take a toll on his professional career. So, Virtue, I'll start with you. Your thoughts on Scott Hall and Jake Roberts, and do you think that either one of them or both of them could have been world champion?
Jake the Snake Roberts with his character, I don't really see that as a world champion character, at least in the WWF. But the way he was put into big storylines, with The Undertaker, with The Ultimate Warrior, with Macho Man, that I enjoyed. And I would have liked to see him stay on the wagon, so to speak. Is it stay on the wagon?
Stay on the
Versus-
wagon. You're
yeah.
good. You're good.
I would have
Yep,
liked
you're good.
him to stay on the wagon a little bit longer, because had he not left, he might have had some really, really more great work in WWF. Now, yes, he did come back and he did the whole King of the Ring thing, but it wasn't the same.
Right.
So, but he definitely, he definitely did not live to his full potential because of the bad habits. Same with Scott Hall. Now, Razor Ramon, in my opinion, had Vince McMahon paid him a lot of money to stay, I think he would have become WWF champion. He could have actually been right up there with Shawn and Brett during that run. Now,
Yep.
It was cool that he went to WCW, but he was more like a sidekick, unfortunately. Nash, to me, Hogan, those guys took the lead role. Scott was great at what he did, though. I'm glad we got to see that. But in my opinion, he would have had to stay in WWF, and Vince would have had to give him the big title. Definitely not to his fullest potential. Jeff.
Well, it's funny that Aaron brings up both Scott and Jake because, thanks to this guy, both of them are still walking and talking because when they got to Dallas's place, it just wasn't happening anymore. They were both on death's door. And having been able to talk to them recently through the course of my work with DDP Yoga, I know for a fact that Scott and Jake both would have been great world champions had they stayed straight, both of them. Virtue mentioned Scott, and Aaron mentioned Razor Ramon could have been the WWF champion, and I think Virtue's right on the money as far as had he stayed with the World Wrestling Federation and not jumped to WCW, Razor could have been a great world champion, 96, 97, somewhere in that area. And the fact of the matter is, Vince wouldn't pay him what he felt he deserved, so he left. Now, Virtue make a very good point about Scott being a sidekick, and I totally agree with that. When Scott and Kevin first came into WCW, they were more they were taking the lead for that storyline. But once Hogan came into the NWO, Scott almost took, like you said, the proverbial back seat. Jake the Snake Roberts, when he was in the WWF, Virtue mentioned he was a little bit different character than would have been world champion. I think had it not been the Hulk Hogan era, it would have been easier for Jake to be the world champion. But because Hulk Hogan was the big, bright-colored, red and yellow superhero, we weren't going to see a dark, mysterious character until The Undertaker, obviously, be the world champion. Yeah. And I think it's a very good point to bring up that had Jake not been injured by the Honky Tonk Man in 1987, we may have seen Jake be the world champion. I'm going to stop babbling and pass on to Tyler.
Well, it's kind of hard for me to talk about these two names because I wasn't born yet. When Jake and Jake and Razor Ramon were yeah. So I haven't seen a couple Razor Ramon matches. I saw his WrestleMania 10 match with Shawn Michaels, and if that's any indication of how well that guy works, then I agree. I think that he could have easily been WWF champion. With Jake Roberts, he had the finisher that everyone loved, and he had the snake and everything. Maybe I could see him as mid-card champ. I'm not sure if he would have ever been WWE champion, because his character, he doesn't seem like I just couldn't see him fitting the championship mold, especially back then. The look was important, even more so than it is today. So.
All right, well, Tyler just froze on us, so I will finish Tyler's thoughts. Jake Roberts, I agree with you guys. I think maybe he wasn't a big enough star to be world champion, but I do feel that his heel character could have lasted longer during that 92 period. I thought he was an awesome heel. I mean, the stuff he did was unbelievable, how effective he was as a heel. And I was very upset that heel run did not last longer.
Well, do you think had he stayed straight in WCW, they would have made him the world champion there? I mean, you got to remember, Bill Watts were in WCW, and Jake hated Bill Watts. So, was it going to be a situation where he was world champion? Who knows? Now, let me ask you guys this, since you guys have all seen the ladder match. Some say, including Ric Flair, that Shawn Michaels had a great match with the ladder. Razor just happened to win the title. Some people argue, like Shawn Michaels, that Razor was an equal part of that, like Shawn. What do you guys think?
It takes two to tango.
Yeah,
exactly.
Razor absolutely. Shawn wouldn't have had the magic in that match that really catapulted him had he not been working with Razor. Razor was awesome in that match.
I can attest to that. I agree. It does take two to put on an excellent match, and you can only carry someone so far.
Exactly.
5-star matches, they aren't carried. You have to, you both have to contribute equally. Yes. So, I agree with that. It takes two to tango.
Tyler, right. I want to ask you about your own personal top pick here. Who do you consider to be the wrestler that should have been like a world champion or should have been a lengthy main eventer that never really got that shot to do it?
Oh, let's see. I've got a couple names in mind, but my top one, it would probably be Eddie Guerrero. He was WWE champion before, and he had a decent run in WCW, but I think, right when it was his prime, he passed. Yeah. So I can't imagine, how successful Eddie would have been, and I think he could have went another 5 or 10 years even, since he was so well in his prime. He was over with the fans, and, I think that he could have been at least a 5-time WWE champion. He had the charisma, he was excellent in the ring, he had the catchphrases, he was over with the fans, and, it's just a real shame what happened to him.
Well, Tyler, this is why I love the panel guests, because they're always on the same wavelength. Eddie Guerrero was actually the next name I had here on the list, so you did me a very good service here by bringing him up. And I agree with you. I think you nailed it about Eddie. His body, unfortunately, had broken down on him, but personality-wise, he was definitely at his peak. I mean, that character was so over with the fans, and I believe the plan was for him to win the title before he passed away. So no doubt, if Eddie had been able to stay healthy, he would have had several more years on top, if not even longer, maybe a decade.
And think about this, we could have maybe seen him work some matches with guys like CM Punk and Daniel Bryan. Even though he would have been older, think about that.
And Aaron, you brought up the fact he was supposed to be champion. As far as I understand it, Stephanie even herself said that he was supposed to win a triple threat match with Batista and Orton to win the title, at the tapings, the ones that he passed away the night before. So,
Wow.
that's very indicative. He was going to be the man again.
Yeah, two other people that I would like to include similar fashion to Eddie Guerrero, Owen Hart and Brian Pillman. Both of them, I think, could have been major stars. With Owen Hart, I talked about how, I've said this on my own videos, I've said that if Owen had lived, he probably would have had a career resurgence in WWE because you had the Radicals coming in, you had Chris Jericho coming in. Owen would have had a whole new batch of people to work with, and I think that would have gotten him emotionally invested in being in WWE again, because it felt like before he died, like he was mentally done. He was ready to move on and be with his family and retire. I think he would have been in WWE several more years. And Brian Pillman, I think if Pillman had lived, Pillman would have been up against Steve Austin for the WWE title in 1998. I think that would have been an awesome feud. Jeff?
I think if Pillman hadn't broken his ankle in 96, he would have been a great superstar. Wouldn't have been so addicted to the painkillers and would have gone, like you said, much, much longer. I think that car accident changed everything for Brian, and that's a damn shame.
Absolutely. Virtue.
Yeah, with Owen, like I enjoyed everything that he did when he had his actual heel run with Brett, the matches with Austin. So I guess from that standpoint, I feel like he did accomplish things. But Aaron, you're absolutely right. Had the tragedy not happened, think about this. I think about this one all the time. He was doing the Blue Blazer gimmick right towards the end there. Now, I know Chris Jericho came in and that spot with The Rock was meant to be. Could you imagine, though, if somehow they worked a second they were doing all these different people playing the Blazer. Could you imagine if Jericho debuted as a Blazer and we didn't know who that was? And it was revealed as Jericho, and he feuded with Owen. That would have been fantastic. Granted, I still wanted that Rock promo to happen, but I think of things like that had Owen lived.
Well, it's funny. You mentioned Chris Jericho. Jericho, in his first book, I think, toward the end of the book, he was talking about making his WWF transition. One of the reasons he wanted to go to WWF was because Owen was there.
Yes.
And the fact that he was going to get to work with Owen. And when he went to the funeral, he looked and he said, "What happened, buddy? I mean, we were supposed to be, tag team champions together here in the WWF, and now it's all done."
I mean, yeah, Owen Hart versus Chris Jericho, Owen Hart versus Chris Benoit, Owen Hart versus
Dean Malenko, Eddie Guerrero,
Kurt Angle. So many matches for Owen Hart. I mean, Owen Hart's career. I mean, the thing is, Owen was in an era where there weren't a lot of really great workers in WWE. I mean, you had Brett, you had Shawn Michaels, you had Steve Austin, but there weren't a lot of guys for Owen to really have great matches with because that era was more about men on a mission and those type of guys. Tyler, anything else you want to add regarding Pillman, Owen Hart, and who's your next pick?
Well, you said Brian Pillman versus Steve Austin. That's
yes.
Wow. Could you imagine the promo work?
Well, I always said that Pillman could have been in Mick Foley's role. Imagine the loose cannon Brian Pillman in a suit and tie. I don't know. For me, that would be really scary as hell.
Yeah,
that'd be funnier in hell. Is what it would have been.
The guy that brings the gun on Rawls in a suit.
Exactly.
I don't know. I mean, like you guys said, though, you pretty much hit the nail on the head with Pillman. And I agree with you about Owen Hart, how he definitely could have had a resurgence. Owen Hart versus Dean Malenko is a personal dream match of mine. That would just be amazing. And my next pick, it might be a little controversial, but I think that Chris Benoit could have definitely had a great career. He had a good one, but I think it just could have been a great career because, his body was also, it seemed to be shutting down on him, but he was set to win the title the next night, wasn't he, before he passed?
Yes.
The ECW championship, yep.
Yeah, he probably should have been world champion for longer, I think that some would argue that his title run was too short.
Well, the thing is, they had lit a candle under Randy Orton's ass, and they were putting a rocket there next to send him to the moon. So somebody had to take the fall. It happened to be Benoit.
I had heard Vince Russo actually said this when he was in WWE. He saw a tryout match with Benoit and Owen, and they didn't sign Benoit because Pat Patterson said he can't cut promos. I mean, and again, we know that's what WWE wants, but they ended up getting him. And he still had a fairly decent run in WWE, but it sucks that what ended up happening, obviously.
Well, I think he's arguably the greatest technical wrestler whose promo skills were way lacking where it should have been, I think.
Jeff, I want to ask you, what about MVP and Mr. Kennedy? Those are two guys that seemed like they were on their way to becoming major stars in WWE. Mr. Kennedy was the Money in the Bank winner. He was being groomed to be Vince's illegitimate son, and then it all went to crap. And MVP, it just felt like he could have been a really big deal. He was a good promo. He was a good wrestler, but for whatever reason, it just didn't materialize.
Well, I think the fact that both of them reached the star potential with TNA Impact, whatever the hell you want to call that promotion today. I mean, they literally, put Kennedy in a program with Sting, Anderson almost right away, and then he was with Aces and Eights, and he wasn't. They were keeping him in the main event spotlight because they recognized, like we recognized, that Ken Anderson was a marquee main event talent in the making. Now, you mentioned the Money in the Bank and losing the briefcase, the contract, excuse me, Vince, sorry. The fact is, he was supposed to be, carry that briefcase contract the entire way to WrestleMania 24. That was the plan. And he was going to be Vince's son, like you said. He just got hurt. And rather than wait it out, see how bad the injury was, Vince panicked and boom, here comes Edge. With MVP, I think, and I might get flack for this because people that have held the title before and after, I think he's the greatest WWE holder of the U.S. Championship.
Oh, that's a nice
bold,
praise for
bold
him.
Claim.
The thing about MVP too is I think his age might have been a factor, that he broke in a little bit too late. Like DDP. DDP broke in pretty late. DDP's another guy I think maybe if he had reached that star level, like when he was feuding with Randy Savage, if he was maybe 5 years younger, I think DDP would have had a lengthier run in wrestling.
I honestly think that had they brought, and well, I'm sure we'll talk about this on a future episode, but had they brought Dallas in as anything else but the stalker of Undertaker's wife, I think, and had he not got hurt a year later, I think he would have been a really good, if not WWF champion, maybe Intercontinental champion, or once again win the U.S. championship when they brought that back.
Yeah.
So, and as far as Dallas reached the potential for a guy that started at 35. The fact that he won the title at over 40 and was a three-time champion at the end of the day, yeah, it was WCW, but you know what? When he won the championship, people like me, it's like, that's our guy. Yeah, Hogan was champion, and Flair was champion going into that match, but Dallas really, whether he turned heel the next time or not, he was still the original People's Champion, and we were so happy that he won the championship.
Yeah, he was using that phrase before The Rock.
Yeah, so I think he reached his potential. He didn't reach his WWE potential. If that makes any sense.
I agree. I definitely agree on that one.
I'm not a fan of MVP. Never was. Nothing against him. I just didn't like it. So to me, I felt like he reached what he should have reached in WWE.
Oh.
But that's my opinion. I don't know what it is. Maybe the gimmick, the MVP. I mean, it was so WWE. That gimmick screamed Vince McMahon. But I just, for whatever reason, didn't he have like the lounge, the little show that he did, like all wrestlers get, and I just
VIP lounge, baby.
I didn't buy into it. However, I had been put in his finisher move before. Someone, where he put his leg over their head and swoop them down. Like I was actually put in that move a few times.
Randy Orton's old finisher.
But as for Kennedy, he that was a shame by WWE. That guy is a star, and I enjoyed his work in TNA. He got to work with, like you said, Sting, Kurt Angle. But I don't know, a little bit of politics came into play, Randy Orton. And I wish we would have got to see more Mr. Kennedy. He'd be a guy I really wish they would bring back. I mean, even if, as crazy as it sounds, because it's developmental, how they need bring him to NXT. You did Drew McIntyre.
Yeah, and Virtue, I wanted to add to what you said. I think maybe with the costume, some people did not like that costume. It was
MVP?
like the Power Ranger. Ranger.
It was bad. Well,
I didn't hate him as a guy, but like the character, I just didn't buy into it.
Well, what's funny is MVP is just as a Power Ranger. People don't buy it. Seth Rollins comes out as a Power Ranger in SummerSlam. And It's totally over. It's totally over.
Yeah.
Go figure.
I like Seth for Seth, not because of that.
I do too. I'm just saying the fact that I like MVP, but I hate his costume.
Oh,
and here we were almost 10 years later, and I love Seth Rollins to pieces, but he came out looking like a damn White Ranger at SummerSlam that one year. It's like, really? So,
Yeah, Tyler, what are you thinking? Who else do you have on your list?
Well, I thought that I liked MVP because and I liked this costume too because it was a unique look. It was
there you go.
It was different. It was different than just the trunks and singlet. It was different. I liked it. And I remember when he first started, he had like the tunnel as his
That was
entrance.
cool.
He came out with
That was a cool
He
entrance.
did his little basketball thing.
Yeah.
yeah,
You
yeah. I
probably
thought
did
he
that,
was.
didn't you?
He's balling.
I thought he was unique.
I'll never do that again. I'm too white for that. Sorry.
And then, I remember he had a feud with Matt Hardy. I think they were
Yep.
tag champs, right?
They were tag champion while Matt was chasing the U.S. championship. Yep.
That's
I
right.
enjoyed that
Yeah,
storyline.
and
They had all the competitions.
So did I.
They had the basketball competition,
Yeah.
and then they had
There was a pizza eating contest.
yeah.
Oh, yeah. And then a victory contest with Austin and JBL.
And they brought in
Fire
Evander
girl.
Holyfield.
Yeah. See, I thought MVP was good, and I think that he could have been world champion. And with Ken Kennedy, oh man, that was just WWE dropping the ball. That was a prime
big time.
example.
Kennedy did
this
get
guy-
suspended though.
He did.
Yeah.
He did.
Yeah,
You know, for everything that current fans want Enzo Amore to be, because they don't like his in-ring work, Anderson isn't the best in-ring worker, but like I think everybody would like Enzo if he was like Ken Anderson.
oh yeah,
Yeah, I
You know
would
what
agree.
I mean? Yeah, and the mic thing, the way they use the old school mic, that's why I thought of that.
Yep. Well,
Anderson. When I didn't mean to cut you off, Jeff, but
no, you're good. You're good.
I cut you off. Sorry, Tyler.
Yeah, no problem. But his entrance, with the spotlight and the mic dropping from the ceiling, it was unique. And it's hard to be unique today. And MVP and Ken Kennedy, they definitely were. So I like.
I agree with you 100%,
I agree.
Tyler. Who else do you have on your list?
Well, I don't think that you guys brought up Ahmed Johnson.
I got him on my list here.
Oh, okay. Well, that guy, he definitely had the look. Big muscly guy, bald guy. Vince had to be behind him. But his in-ring work, it just wasn't there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that Ahmed Johnson could have potentially, he could have potentially been more.
If he hadn't got injured so much, he was very injury prone.
Yeah, he was injury prone. But
Did he ever end up in WCW? I'm very
surprised.
He
was Big
T, baby, Big T.
Yeah, because Booker T and Stevie Ray feuded over the letter T, and Booker T lost the match, and he lost the right to use the letter T. And you wonder why WCW lost $60 million in 1 year.
That sounds like a Russo creation right there.
Actually, I think that was Kevin Sullivan.
Friggin' $1 million.
I believe that was Kevin Sullivan, actually. Russo had walked out, after Sold Out, and then they did that storyline. So I think that was Kevin Sullivan's work.
Ahmed had a nice program with Goldust over the Intercontinental Champ? Like that to me is what stood out. I mean, I know he got inserted into the Nation. That was a little different, but
bad.
That was well.
It was forced. It felt forced.
Well, considering the fact that he won the IC title from Goldust, got hurt because of Farouk, and a year later joins Farouk's Nation, like what?
Yeah, and they turned him back a couple weeks later because they knew that was a flop. That pretty much killed Ahmed's momentum as a babyface. He never recovered after that.
He didn't. He definitely didn't.
I got one.
Okay. Cool.
Okay.
Davey Boy Smith, the British Bulldog.
There you go.
Oh yeah, there you go.
Great with the Dynamite Kid as a tag champs. He had that moment with Brett, Wembley Stadium, SummerSlam '92. Jeff.
Yep, 92.
And unfortunately for him, the steroid thing got him, and I think I think he could have been up there maybe as a WWF champ feuding with Brett, maybe HBK, but I think the steroids halted his push. What do you guys think?
I absolutely agree with that. The fact that he went almost the same route as Dynamite, because remember Dynamite hurt his back really bad and had to retire because of it. Now he's in a wheelchair. Davey Boy had the injury on the trap door on the ring in WCW, had a staph infection, and got hooked on morphine. Only got clean for a little bit because WWF sponsored his rehab. So,
Yeah, he was such a great athlete. I mean, that was a real shame about Davey Boy Smith. Definitely one of the best athletically gifted people in WWE.
The guy was Cesaro freak strong. That's how strong Bulldog
he was.
What
though? He was a really, really, really good wrestler.
Yeah.
Those matches he had with Owen.
Yeah, I was going to say, add him to the list with Owen. I was talking earlier that Owen did not have a lot of really talented opponents. Davey Boy was definitely one of those guys. And that match on Raw they had for the European title, one of the best Raw matches of all time, in my personal opinion. You should definitely watch it if you guys haven't seen it. That 97.
I,
Check it
I
out.
honestly think, with the exception of Jim Neidhart, who is a great, he was a great brawl guy, but he wasn't the best technical guy. I think everybody in the Hart Foundation had the potential to be some of the best technical guys. Only Brett really got to that upper echelon, but Owen, Bulldog, and Pillman were all on this list, as we said. So those three guys in particular, and along with Brett and Anvil, were, they're arguably one of the top 3 or 4 factions of all time. And the reason for that is because they were all solid workers, and they had a chip on their shoulder because they didn't get to that point.
Yeah. What about Marty Jannetty? He was one half of the Rockers. Shawn Michaels went on to be one of the greatest of all time. Marty Jannetty just kind of fizzled out. What happened with him?
Because I think he was one half of the Rockers.
I think he was very talented in the ring. I mean, Jeff, what do you think?
I think that Marty, if you read Sean's book, and I think Marty's problems were there even before we knew Marty's problems were there. Like, he was a little bit of a troublemaker in the AWA. He had his demons already when he was working with Sean and like Continental and the AWA. And I think more than anything else, his jealousy over the fact that Vince saw Shawn Michaels before anybody saw Shawn Michaels.
Yeah.
And the fact that they, talking about strap a rocket to somebody's ass, Shawn went right off as soon as he broke up with Jannetty, and that really got to Marty. So I don't know if Marty never reached his potential. I just think that Marty allowed Marty not into it. It was Marty's fault. It was, you talk about different things factoring into potential not being reached. Marty screwed Marty out of his potential.
You could tell, though, when the Rockers were together that Shawn had the it factor. Marty didn't. I'm sorry. He did. I mean, That's why Shawn got the rocket put on him, because he actually had just, demons too, obviously. We know, but we
know that.
Yeah. But Vince McMahon didn't care because Shawn had charisma and would go out there and still deliver. Even though he left so many times because he was hurt, lost his smile, you name it. But the fact is, Marty just didn't have that it factor, in my opinion.
I wholeheartedly agree with that. Tyler, what do you think?
I can't say much about the Rockers either. I really need to go back and watch some network stuff. But I think that Shawn Michaels was full of charisma, and I don't think that Marty was. That's really the most that I could say about that.
All right, well, just remember, the network is only $9.99.
Well, Tyler, let's talk about a couple of current guys, so we can get some of your thoughts. Jeff?
Okay.
My next pick is simply Ravishing, and I don't mean Lana. Ravishing Rick Rude. That guy, he was a champion in world class, and he was one of the greatest Intercontinental champions, short term or not. I think if Vince had not been so nearsighted on the Warrior, and if WCW had actually pulled the trigger on Rude, he could have been a great world champion in both promotions.
Well, the injury in WCW was what really did him in. I mean, I think that if he had not gotten hurt in that match with Sting, I think Rude would have feuded with Hogan over the world title.
And I think the other problem is, he was challenging Flair for the NWA title, and they had the big falling out in the NWA. So by the time he won the title, it was literally being called the Big Gold Belt for a while. So that hurt the credibility of what became the international world title in WCW. So I think that, people still call that a world championship, but it wasn't the NWA championship. It wasn't the WCW championship. So I think that's one of those things where Rude's injury hurt his potential of being world champion of WCW, but also the hokiness of the NWA WCW fallout really hurt Rick.
Yeah.
I think.
You know what, and correct me if this actually did happen, Jeff. One feud I really wish would have happened early in the 90s was Rick Rude and Kurt Hennig. And I know they were both heels, but to me, I was drawn to those two guys because of how great they were in the ring.
Well, I think had Rude stayed with the WWF and, not been so disenchanted, especially with Bobby, because, I think the problem is they were both managed by Bobby, and Rude was so hated that you couldn't really turn him babyface. He was such a natural, cocky SOB. When they turned Kurt face in 92 going into 93, I think that, if Bobby and Rude if Bobby and Rick Rude, Gloria, if Bobby Heenan and Ravishing Rick Rude had stayed on the same page, they could have had a good feud with a babyface Mr. Perfect.
Yeah.
Tyler, I want to ask you about Zack Ryder because he's a guy that managed to get over on his own without the corporate machine, yet they never really gave him the big push. And it seems like that guy was able to connect with the audience. I mean, what happened with him in your opinion?
I'm not really sure what went on with Zack. I mean, he had the Z True Long Island Story, his little web show, and everyone was doing the woo 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 chants with him.
Yep.
And then he had that storyline with Kane and Eve. Yeah, I think that was really like the end of Zack Ryder. I'm not sure. I'm not sure why. And he came in as an edgehead with Kurt Hawkins. I thought they had an okay tag team, actually.
Yeah.
And they had cool entrance music, too, I thought. I don't know. I'm not sure what went on with Zack. And it seems like now he's going nowhere with the Hype Bros.
Yeah, well, they did the thing at WrestleMania 32, which made me have to shave my head.
I was just going to say, I am convinced of this theory. I think Vince McMahon or somebody in his circle watches our shows and they went, okay, we're going to cost this guy his hair. Put the title on Zack for one night.
It made no logical sense to do that. They just did it literally to swerve everybody because nobody was expecting him to win. It was just the most ridiculous thing, and then he immediately loses the title.
I think he's busted his ass, though. I think that he definitely deserves more than what he's getting.
I'm a bit annoyed with him now because he did block the NoDQ.com Twitter account after all the years of support for him.
He did?
Because I do the live play-by-play on Twitter, and I mentioned his botch. I think it was one of those SmackDown Battle Royals last year.
Oh, he slipped off the...
Yeah, I mentioned that, and I guess, what's weird is I did not tag him, so he must search his name on Twitter and look up what people are saying about him.
I'm telling you, Vince reads and watches NoDQ. It's confirmed.
He does. I said that.
Maybe not Vince, but somebody there does. I think.
Hunter.
The man with 3 H's.
I have a bit of a cold. Sorry, I apologize.
Tyler, what about Damien Sandow? He's another guy that
I was gonna bring him up. I don't know. I love Damien Sandow. When he won his program with Cody Rhodes was gold, in my opinion. With the briefcase, they were tag partners, and he won the briefcase. And then he had his own custom briefcase, and I thought his cash in on Cena. I don't understand why he didn't win that, because you even had the excuse. Cena was injured, and he attacked him before the match. He targeted the shoulder. He could have been world champion. He had the mic work. He had a unique gimmick. He was solid in the ring. Yeah. So I'm just not sure why the company didn't pull the trigger on it. It doesn't make sense to me. As far as I know, there was no backstage politics because his release was apparently pretty friendly. He wasn't beat up about it. But I don't know if you guys saw much of his GFW run.
Wasn't
good. No.
Okay.
No.
Well, he apparently wasn't as motivated as he was in WWE.
He was on X-Pac's podcast not so long after he left GFW, and even mentioned that once he left WWE, he lost the passion for the business. That's why he went into acting for a little. I don't know if he still is or not, but yeah, Aaron Stevens mentioned that he had. Once they totally jobbed out and released Damien Sandow as a character, he was done. He didn't want to do it anymore.
And he was gold with The Miz. He's coming off. The crowd loved that, and so there had to have been some politics, in my opinion, because I know he was a Triple H guy. Triple H really endorsed him early on, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff. Was he trained by Killer Kowalski or that same?
Nope.
Yeah,
Walter.
I'm shocked that Miz program was so hot, and then it was nothing.
Well, I think the beginning and the end was he was teaming with Axel as the Meta Powers, and then Hogan got in trouble. So
I forgot about that.
They had to go get rid of Axel Mania, and Sandow got lost in the shuffle.
Yeah, that was bad.
I thought that was an entertaining act. It was so bad that it was.
Everything Sandow did was entertaining, and I remember WrestleMania 31, the Andre Battle Royal. Like the crowd really wanted to see Sandow win, and then when Big Show won, there's just this collective groan. Like
there was no point in giving it to Big Show. Like it didn't benefit Big Show at all.
Because he's Andre's son, according to WCW.
Big Show is not a validation.
Here's one for you, Aaron.
Okay.
Because you brought this up in other videos, especially where he was at the time he was at his biggest. Well, Raven.
Raven, yeah, definitely.
Raven was huge in ECW, so he got to, from that part of his career, he reached the top. But in WCW, he was very, very good as the United States champion, his program with DDP. And I think he could have been so much more later on in WCW had he stayed when they needed newer guys like him. So what's your thoughts, Aaron, on Raven? Because you brought him up.
They needed to make new stars in WCW. They needed to phase out Hogan and Savage and Kevin Nash and make new stars. And Raven was on that list of guys that were ready, willing, and able to succeed and take that spot. Chris Jericho, Raven, Chris Benoit. WCW had these guys and just blew it. And I mean, unfortunately for Raven, he kind of lost his momentum after WCW. He went to WWE and really didn't do a whole lot. And there really wasn't much room for him to succeed in WWE because you had so many other guys in the company on top. It was hard for him to really break out. And I think maybe he just didn't have the motivation like he did in WCW. I mean, he quit WCW because he wasn't being used.
Jeff will attest to this, though. When he went to the early TNA days, he had a nice little run there.
Dude, he was the biggest threat to the NWA Championship for a period of 2 or 3 years. Like, whoever was champion, it was all about Raven. It was all about Raven, as he said for many years, achieving his destiny to be the world champion. He even counted ECW World Championship as a world championship. He wanted to be the NWA champion, and he got there. He had to win a King of the Mountain match, but he got there. And then, once again, politics and everything got the title back to Jarrett. So, Raven is very much a victim of the system, if you will, which is what his character was about. He was put down by...
And I'll tell you something on Raven. If for anything, he should still be in the business. He should be on the writing team. In my opinion, guys like him should be writing SmackDown and Raw.
Well, it's funny. You mentioned ECW champion Raven. I don't know how much heat I'm going to get for this because a lot of people don't like this guy. What about Shane Douglas?
Well, the thing about Shane Douglas is I thought that his promos were good, but at the same time, he was cutting promos where he's ripping into the other companies. And, it's pretty easy to get a pop when you cut those promos.
Right.
I did think some of his stuff in WCW was entertaining, though, with Torrie Wilson and Kidman. I definitely feel he could have done more, but you know what? Also, Dean Douglas, I thought was an entertaining character, and I felt that what happened there? He was only there for like 3 months, and I thought that was an entertaining character.
Well, it's funny you mention that because I think Mick Foley said it best. The biggest enemy of Dean Douglas was Shane Douglas.
Yeah,
because he was no longer the vile, the vulgar, the over-the-top promo guy, the franchise. He was a heel teacher who had to scrape the chalkboard to get a decent pop.
But
and
I liked it.
I did too, but it's not Shane Douglas. It's not the franchise of ECW that we had come to expect.
He's not
the guy.
It was too soon for him. It's just the timing wasn't right, and I guess there was heat with the Clique. There were a bunch of factors.
The Clique is a big part of Shane Douglas's lack of momentum, and the thing is, Dean Douglas was not the same guy that threw down the NWA Championship. He was not Shane Douglas. I mean, and that's what killed him. You mentioned WCW. Other than the Viagra on a pole match, which Shane Douglas was a really good, solid heel throughout his WCW run. I mean, it wasn't the best feuds with Ric Flair and whatnot, but his work on the microphone, even in a family-oriented Turner environment, was still very, very solid, I thought. And he had a decent little run in TNA also, like Raven did, but I think injuries really hampered him at the end.
Yeah, definitely. There were a lot of factors with him. Speaking of people getting hurt, I mean, going back to the NWA period, Magnum TA is a guy who many think would have been a major superstar, but unfortunately he had his accident, which ended his career, which was a real shame. I mean, Jeff, you've talked about Magnum TA, how much he had the potential to be a major superstar in the NWA.
It's funny you mentioned Magnum because, Dusty, you talk about people strapping a rocket to somebody's ass. Dusty saw Magnum before he was Magnum. He saw this guy, Terry Allen, who happened to resemble Tom Selleck. He was working in Florida for Dusty and everything, and Dusty went, okay, you're the guy. You're going to be the one to beat Flair. And he was going to beat Ric Flair for the World Championship. That was in the cards. It was almost predestined. It was almost one of those things where you can see, even if you're not clairvoyant, you can see Magnum be the world champion. And, at least he didn't die in the car wreck, but that's one of the most tragic stories I've ever seen in wrestling. The fact that the car accident took his career.
Yeah.
What's even more tragic, I don't know if you guys saw the news not too long ago, but because of his need to be on, what do they call it, the
Disney incident where they
they wouldn't allow him in the park. It's like, this is Disneyland, this is Disney World. If they're not ADA, who the hell is?
Yeah.
Like, that's terrible. And the fact is, it's such a tragic, caveat addition to the story. The fact that this big, strapping young athlete is now reduced to being turned away at the Magic Kingdom because he can't walk. It's terrible.
Another tragic story is Draws.
Oh. Well, Virtue and Tyler, what do you guys think of Magnum?
Well, on Magnum, do you think he would have had a run in WWF, like, if the accident didn't happen? Because you know Vince liked to cherry pick.
He did like to cherry pick, but I think that, well, it depends. Because, see, Magnum got hurt before Dusty jumped to the WWF. I think that if Magnum had stayed healthy and Dusty had not jumped to Vince and did that ridiculous, because even Magnum himself said he was more mad for Dusty than Dusty was for the polka dots. Like, he was legit pissed off.
Yeah, I see gimmicks like Magnum's in Indy today still. So there's some people doing some old school homework.
Well, what's funny is his stepdaughter is Tessa Blanchard, and she attributes her success to Tully and to Magnum both, which is the funniest thing. So they had this huge feud, but the fact that Tessa was in the Mae Young Classic this year, and she's very much a product of her stepfather and her father. They're both, and of course her grandfather, Joe Blanchard. But Tully and Magnum's legacy, I think, is solidified because Tessa is one of the talents in the business where she hasn't quite tapped her full potential, but she will.
Tyler, are you feeling a bit young here? I mean, any thoughts? I was looking at you trying to keep up with Jeff there. I'm just going to ask.
I'm not in. I've read up on Magnum TA. I've read about what happened and everything, but
he's almost before my time. I mean, quite frankly.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny. I didn't start watching until 1990, so everything I've seen on Magnum has been watching videotapes of the network. And Aaron was watching 87. He was already hurt by 87, I think, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was already out by then. So yeah, I mean, in a way, Magnum TA was even before my time. There are other WCW guys too. I did want to mention Draws. That's a really tragic situation. Who knows how far he would have gone though? I mean, he was really in the early part of his career, so we really don't know if he was going to be a major star or not, but he never really got the opportunity because of his injury. Now, Jeff, you want to add something to that?
Well, no. What about the guy that injured him and his old tag team partner, D'Lo Brown and Mark Henry? And Mark Henry both, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like D'Lo was really getting over with the fans, and then after Draws' injury, his push kind of just went downhill, which really sucks.
I seem to recall that he hurt Draws in October of 99, and by WrestleMania 2000, he was Godfather's pimp in training or some stupid shit like that. Like, much it. That was bad. That was it. You're done.
I think D'Lo would have thrived if WCW stayed in business and he got to go there like beyond 2001. I think he could have become a big star there. I don't know why. I don't know why that I mean, I know TNA, but it wasn't the same. It was way smaller.
Well, what's funny about the TNA thing is we had him on Extreme Mayhem like the week after he got released by WWE, and some other podcast was stating that they had him first, and we were all on record saying that we had him before that. Ours just didn't go up before the other one. And D'Lo himself went on what was social media back then. They're like, no, these guys were first.
I got one for you.
Thank you,
Tyler. I got one for you, and you just saw him last week on SmackDown Return. Shelton Benjamin. I'm going to give that one to you.
I could go on for an entire video about Shelton Benjamin. This guy, arguably the greatest pure athlete in wrestling or in WWE history. I remember the first Money in the Bank ladder match.
Yes.
This guy, it was so innovative. I don't know, this guy, Shelton Benjamin's mom, the world's greatest tag team. I don't know. I mean, hopefully with this run with Gable, he goes far, because I think Gable has all the tools, but Shelton also has all the tools. I think Shelton Benjamin could have been the first black WWE champion easily. I think Kofi Kingston's right up there with him, I think. I don't know. I think that Shelton...
Yeah,
Definitely.
funny story about Shelton Benjamin. A friend of mine at the time, he was losing interest in wrestling, and I got him to watch Shelton Benjamin. He was starting to get into Shelton. He really liked him. And then they had that match on Raw where Triple H beat him, and he looked at me and he said, "This is exactly why I stopped watching wrestling." You know,
Yep.
he wanted
And
to
Shelton
see.
had some very, very good matches with Chris Jericho. Here, I'm going to tell you this, Tyler. Do you watch much New Japan? Do you know? Are you
Yeah.
familiar with Kenny Omega? Obviously.
Oh, of course.
I don't know what it is about Shelton Benjamin, even because he came before Omega did. They remind me of each other in a way. The skill sets. You got to go and kind of dissect it, which I did. But when I see Shelton Benjamin, I see Kenny Omega and vice versa, and maybe that's why I decided to bring him up. But what do you? I mean, you see a similarity there?
Okay.
Yeah, I can see it. It's like you said, you'd have to dissect it a little bit, but I can kind of see the resemblance.
Yeah.
Well, Virtue, you brought up Shelton Benjamin. What about his old partner, Charlie Haas? I think Charlie could have been a really big superstar, and he did great work with Team Angle, World's Greatest Tag Team. And the thing with Lillian Garcia was funnier than hell. But I said this back then, which was now 16 years ago. I think his brother's death really got to him and really hampered his development as a true megastar. I personally believe.
Was Charlie Haas the one that started doing gimmicks?
Yep.
Yep.
He was doing the Mr. Perfect gimmick before Perfect got brought back.
Yeah, like what brought that about? Like with him being such a great wrestler, why did he get? Is that a Vince McMahon story, like entertainment thing?
Real quick, Jeff, I think you're way off on that. I think your lack of sleep. Charlie Haas was doing the gimmicks like in 2006, 2007, and Mr. Perfect died in 2003. So
sorry.
Yeah.
That's what happens when Jeff Meacham gets no sleep. But yeah.
Well, Sean Stasiak tried to do the Mr. Perfect gimmick. Maybe that's
Sean.
Maybe that's what you were thinking about.
Sean O'Hare's another guy.
Yes.
Had him on my list.
I mean, that guy had the look. He was tall. He was muscular, and he seemed to have an interesting gimmick in 2003, and it just fizzled out after a couple months. I was like, what the hell?
And they had Piper involved with that a little bit.
Yep.
It could have been, but then he was getting booked on Velocity, and I was there. I think he had some demons backstage. Something was going on backstage.
He did. He did for sure. Well, you mentioned guys in WWE in that era. XMV camera breaking notwithstanding. How about Luther Reigns and even Mark Jindrak, the new Team Angle? How about
no, absolutely 100% no on Luther Reigns.
Okay,
that guy should not have even gotten a job in WWE, quite frankly.
Yeah, we could say Matt. I'll put Matt Morgan as a little bit never reached his potential.
Oh,
a little bit.
The stuttering gimmick just ruined him.
Oh wait,
totally.
Tyler started stuttering. What?
I definitely agree with you about Matt Morgan. Like, I was very impressed with this TNA run. But yeah, the stuttering gimmick in WWE, some of these
bad gimmicks can ruin good talent. That's the truth.
How about Chris Kanyon? I think Chris Kanyon was a really talented worker, great bump taker, and he never really reached his full potential in either WCW or WWE. I think he could have done better in both companies.
I agree.
I think the problem was not his in-ring work, because he was great. I think gimmicks in both companies just kicked his butt. Well, I mentioned
that Mortis was probably his best gimmick. I mean, if you really think about it.
It really was. I mentioned Luther Reigns. What about Mark Jindrak? He was supposed to be an Evolution.
That is true.
He was.
Yep. And then they went Batista instead. Can you imagine if they'd strapped that rocket to Mark Jindrak's butt?
I think Jindrak lacked the intensity that somebody like Batista had, and even somebody like Sean O'Hare, what he had. I just think he lacked the intensity.
Well, but the thing is, here to say Jeff Meacham, here's the thing. I honestly believe that if they had put Jindrak in Evolution, we could have seen him come out of that proverbial shell and be more intense and be more aggressive and be one of those guys to be a successor to the Horseman, be Evolution, and be the guy that could be the future world champion. Because I think he was poised to be Evolution's breakout star before they added Batista, and then Orton just went instead.
Yeah.
Yep.
Aaron.
WWE always wanted more Hispanic stars. What happened with Carlito? Because I thought this guy was top shelf stuff. Carlito Colon.
Yeah, they never brought him back.
I think he could have been so much more in WWE.
I agree on that, and they never brought him back. I think
I
that,
thought that they would bring him back to be with the Shining Stars, but
I saw him at Indy. He's still in good
well,
shape.
he would have totally outshined them. That's the problem. And TNA
Huh.
never brought him in. I'm surprised because TNA brought in everybody, but they never brought in Carlito. That's interesting.
Well, they brought him back one time when the three of them inducted
Yes.
Carlos in the Hall of Fame, and Carlito got the pop of the night. I don't care what anybody says, other than Edge coming out. Well, I think Edge and the Horsemen were in that same group, but when Carlito came out to induct his father, the place went banana.
And what did he
He's
say?
perfect right now.
What did he
he's
say? He
perfect
said
for
something like, "This is going to affect me getting a comeback or something." I forgot what he said exactly.
Yeah, because they were talking at one point, and he goes up, "I'm fired again."
Yeah, something along those
I think
lines.
he had some backstage heat on that last run, though.
He definitely did. He definitely did.
It might have been Triple H. Somebody he pissed off.
Yeah.
I've got
Why
one
is
for you
everything
guys.
Hunter's fault? Wait, why is everything Hunter's fault on this show?
I don't know, but he definitely pissed someone off because he's too
He had to
talented. If he's not there right now with a brand split in NXT, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, two last names I want to bring up, and then we'll wrap this up from two different eras. One guy I want to mention. Well, I do want to mention Muhammad Hassan since we're in that era, in that ballpark. That is the gimmick that I think was way better than Jinder Mahal. Muhammad Hassan was
Definitely.
the great entrance music. I mean, just the very beginning with the guy singing. Right when that began, the crowd just erupts in boos. You had Daivari out there with him. I thought it was a great act, and unfortunately, because of all that controversy, that angle had to be shut down, and the Hassan character was killed off. I thought that was really unfortunate. That was a great anti-American gimmick. I mean, that was one of my all-time favorite ones. And then the other one I want to mention is Hideo Itami, because of his injuries. He came into WWE with a lot of fanfare, and because of the injuries, he's had his momentum be stalled several times. So, Virtue, your thoughts on those two guys?
Hassan was victim to modern day. That would have been so great, and WWE would have kept going with it in the 1980s. So that just sucks, that the timing of all that, because you're right, he drew a lot of heat. I remember when he was feuding with, or going to be feuding with, The Undertaker. Didn't they have people out there with hoods over their heads? It got really ugly, but from an entertainment. You can do that stuff in movies. What's wrong with WWE?
Exactly.
Well, you got to remember, that happened right after the thing in London where they had bombers in full hoods causing terror.
That's true.
So,
But
yeah.
And then, gosh, I just forgot. Who was the other guy you just brought up, Aaron?
Hideo Itami.
Yeah. You're right. Victim of injury. That's all I can say. I have a feeling he's not going to do anything bigger than he already is unless he goes back and works in the Japan promotions. That's just my opinion.
Yep. Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. Hideo Itami as Kenta was one of the best of all time. Hideo Itami is just injury laden. He will never be above NXT upper mid card at this point. I don't think.
Remember when he in NXT he was the go to sleep just before Punk left, and there was he was getting some big attention, even though that's his move. He was getting some nice attention. This was before all his big injuries started happening.
Yep,
I think
I remember.
Using the GTS is kind of hurting Hideo, in my opinion, because the smart fans, they have to chant CM Punk
but it's
every
his
time
move.
that he.
I know it's his move.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. But I don't know. The Full Sail crowd can just. I've got a love-hate relationship with them.
I agree on that completely.
Yep.
I wanted to mention Barry Windham, too, as the last person I wanted to bring up real quick. Barry Windham, in my opinion, one of the most technically sound guys in wrestling history. I thought everything he did was so smooth in the ring. Such a great worker, in my opinion. Very underrated, if anything. And, WWE brought him in as the Widowmaker, and that fizzled out right away. And, I guess
the stalker.
Yeah, I think he had some personal issues too, but he was another guy that I think was so good in the ring and could have been a top heel for the world title in WWE. I think he should have gotten more opportunities.
Well, the fact that they made him the guy that they put in the program with Ric Flair when he came back to WCW in 1993, he wasn't the WWE champion. I think the fact that Dusty Rhodes said on repeated occasions, Barry was the best pure gifted athlete to ever come into our business. That is high praise from Dusty friggin' Rhodes. I'm sorry. When Dusty says that, it's gospel. Barry, until Barry got later in his career, like 1993, and started to get a little heavy, he was the best athlete of his time. No question about that.
He's so smooth. Everything he does in the ring, like, it looks so good, you know. Some people just have the instinct and know what to do in the ring. You know, some people are good dancers, some people are not, you know, regardless of what you do. Some people just have it in them. They know what they're doing with their profession. And Barry Windham was one of those guys, in my opinion.
Yeah. Barry was everything his father was as a brawler and everything his teacher, Ric Flair, was technically sound.
Absolutely.
He was just the perfect blend of Flair and Blackjack. He was just that guy.
And I know you're not a big fan of Bray Wyatt, Aaron, but I see a little of Barry in him. Like the stuff Bray does well, I see the Barry. Like, obviously,
Uncle Barry, man.
There's another guy, Bray Wyatt, you can add to the list of guys. I think the way they've booked his gimmick, unfortunately. Tyler, your thoughts?
Well, oh man, Bray Wyatt. I don't know.
Let's hear from Bray Wyatt himself. Go.
I mean, people saying he could have been the next Undertaker, and
Where's your hat?
I think, okay, I'm going to go on record here. I know I'm probably going to get some heat for this. I think that Bray Wyatt should have broken the streak, and that should have been the passing of the torch. I think that Bray Wyatt could have been the next Undertaker if
Jim Ross even said Bray should have been booked a lot better because he's got that talent. He called him.
How are we supposed to take him seriously as the new face of fear if he's losing all the time? I can't take anything that he says seriously.
Yeah, he loses a lot, and I remember last year when he turned babyface, that seemed to work. The crowd was really getting into him.
Yeah, we're going to put him against Roman. I was ready for that.
He got injured, and then he came back as a heel again, and that just killed his momentum. So there were a lot of issues with him. But anyways, guys, we got to wrap this thing up here. We pretty much covered everybody on my list. I'd like to thank Tyler for being on today. Tyler, any plugs you have?
Yes, you can just you can follow me on Instagram at Tyler Joseph Smith. You can follow me on Twitter at Mr. Tyler J. Smith. And, of course, you can subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thanks, guys, for having me on, by the way. It was a pleasure.
Of course, absolutely.
Thank you for your viewership and sending in all the questions and whatnot. And you could follow Jeff Meacham at _Jeff Meacham. You can follow Virtue at NoDQ _Virtue. I'm on all forms of social media. That'll do it for this edition of the NoDQ panel, right at about an hour. So we had a really good discussion today. Leave a comment. Let us know what you thought about the video, and we will see you all next time.